Ready then? Ready, are you ready? Okay. Hello, my name's Laurence.
My name's John.
John Gwatkin. Well, John Gwatkin.
Gwatkin. Gwatkin.
Well, that's interesting. So, where does that come from?
We're from Wales, but it precedes Watkin,
Oh, right.
according to research.
Oh, right. Your research or research you've come across?
Well, you come across it, don't you, from time to time,
Yeah.
and they, the companies can, you know, give you a scroll on your antecedents.
So it sounds like Gawain or Gwatkin. It's kind of very kind of Celtic, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
Could I remove your glasses, Mr.
You can indeed. I can't see now, like.
I'm sorry about that, but everyone says that.
Yeah,
But that's one thing that we repeat. Men of a certain age are definitely wearing glasses, and when I take them off, they tell me they can't see.
Well, when you get to 82, you tend to...
82?
Yeah.
You're not 82.
No, I am.
You're joking.
Born in 1936.
I thought you were 88. 82?
Well, yeah.
Please, well done, sir. What's your secret?
No, I've never smoked or anything like that.
Good Lord.
I've been naughty from time to time, but never
Bit
smoked.
of mischief.
Yes.
Wow. Well, congratulations. That's amazing. So, sorry, I'm just getting over that. So you obviously you're here because you were a miner at one point. For a long time?
Well, from all my working life.
Really?
Yes.
So you've and what mine were you attached to?
I was Denby Main Colliery. I started. I left school on Friday, together with my twin brother, and we were taken to Denby Main Colliery from Conisbrough with my father to the training officer, and signed on. Gosh. And we began training, because at that time you were sent for 16-week training to Manvers Main Colliery Training Centre. For 16 weeks.
And we walk around you, don't follow me.
And we started on 31st of December, because at that time there were no New Year's Day holidays.
Right.
You know.
So you started on the 31st of December?
Yes, because you didn't have a New Year's Day as a holiday, or New Year's Eve. And now that's 1960s, late 60s, I would have thought, when that were introduced.
So what date are we talking? When did you...
1951, you know, December 31st, 1951.
Good Lord.
So basically I started 52, yeah.
Is that the Queen's coronation, or we...
No, that was 53.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. And of course at the training centre you were introduced for 16 weeks into the intricacies of haulage, basically, because that's what you aspired to when you started at the pit. Because obviously you need much more experience before you got to the coal face. So you started on the haulages, and you were shown how to work the main and tail systems of haulage, and the endless rope systems of haulage, and pony driving, and the various safety aspects that's associated with that. You know, code of signals and various safety devices, like the drop warwick and the drag and locker.
The drop warwick?
Yes.
What's the drop warwick?
Well, that's a large steel girder that's suspended with a up in the air by a rope, and linked to a second one. And when you lift one up, the other one goes down. So that when you take a run of tubs, which there were at that time, between the two on a slight incline, and anything happens and they get away, then it's derailed by the drop warwick.
Derailed? Well, how do you mean? How does it derail it?
Well, because it's at an angle in between the two rails. Okay. When the first tub hits it, it's thrown off the rails, and progress is halted, hopefully. But sometimes they have been known to take depending on the steepness of the incline, they have been known to take the warwick with them, depending on whether they were full or empty, what sort of weight you were talking about. and that sort of thing.
God.
And then, of course, after 16 weeks, you're back at the pit. And Denby at that time didn't have any pit head baths, so we used to go home on the trackless mucky.
Home on the what? Trackers?
Trackless.
Trackless.
Yeah, that was a trolley bus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, trolley bus. And
so that started at the mine and took you back to
No, that started at Manvers. It was the Mexborough and Swinton Traction Company that went right through Mexborough to Conisborough, turned round at Conisborough, where I lived, and went all the way back to Manvers and turned round there, you know, backwards and forwards throughout the day. And obviously it was a while before any lockers were made available, because the actual pithead baths at that time were taken over by the Ministry of Defence and used as a ordnance assembly unit.
Really?
Yeah, and so only the lower part of the baths were made available in later years for use at the colliery.
God.
And then, of course, a day, I suppose, as a pony driver consisted of, on days anyway, of going down the pit about, well, I like to be early. I like to be on one at first on draw, so it'll be about 5:45 for a 6 o'clock start.
So what's a draw?
Well, that's when the when the cages which take the men underground moves up and down. So you know, one up and down is a draw.
Okay. Okay. So one lift, one delivery.
Yeah, yeah. And the cages themselves were of a three-deck type, open-ended, obviously for the full and empty tubs to go in and out of the mine on the cages, with like a concertina gate at each end that would just drop down. So in essence, you were exposed to the draft and things, because you went down, hurtled down the mine at quite a phenomenal rate, and the passage of the air on you pulled at your clothes.
Really?
Really, yeah, yeah.
Is there G-force involved?
Well, yeah,
Jesus.
And it felt, you know, quite unnerving to start with, but it's something you got used to, like, you know. But they say that the rate of descent for man riding was about half the speed for winding coal, and they used to do something around 60 draws per hour.
60 draws up and down. How deep are we talking?
I'm talking 880 yards.
Holy shit! So this basically they're dropping it down. Well, they can't go any faster than dropping it, surely.
Well, it's a controlled descent.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, obviously they've got brakes and things like that. Yeah. Like, you know, it's not a big spring at the bottom that sends you back up.
Good God! How many an hour? 880 yards, and it's
60 draws to the hour.
So it's 1 a minute.
For coal.
For coal.
For coal. Yeah, yeah.
So it's 1 a minute.
Yeah.
So it's up and down in a minute.
Yeah.
880 yards. How much?
Because one's coming down and one's going up.
Oh, okay.
You know. And so the full tubs are to be taken off and empty ones put on, which was done by the empty tubs being pushed on with a ram and pushing the full tubs off the chair, you know, with rails lined up to accommodate that. And obviously, when I got in the mine to start with, I was given a personal supervisor, which was a requisite in those days, and he pretended or was supposed to look after your interests, like, you know, but when you get in a mine and the deputy thinks you could do a bit more, where, you know, once you'd been shown around a little bit, the necessity for someone to keep his eye on you permanently receded somewhat. Yes, yeah. So you found that the lad who was supposed to be at your side all the time was directed in other places, like, you know. But you quickly learn. And then, you know, once he'd got into the pit and got off the chair at the pit bottom and gone to the box hole where you met the deputy who told you where you were going to work and who you were going to work with.
Box hole?
Box hole, yeah. And that was just a little sort of cabin at the side of the roadway, built into the rock, with a plank across for a table. God. And another plank across to sit on. With
so it's almost like a cave, a little cave.
Yeah, but with a brick wall at the front with small holes in, like serving hatches, through which you shouted 632 or whatever your number was like, you know.
This is your check numbers?
Yes, yeah. And you were told you were going to Sixers. But once you'd been given a district and a stall, you invariably stayed with that, you know, that until such times as things moved on.
Yeah.
Because Denby Main Colliery was one of the last, or in fact it was the last, to have pit ponies.
Oh, right.
And hand got coal.
Hand cut coal?
Hand got coal.
Hand got coal.
Physically got by hand.
Wow.
You know, with a pick and shovel.
Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I did it.
Did you?
Yeah. Well, you know, you got able. You were able to go into the coal when you got to around 18. You weren't allowed before 18. So you know, and invariably, because things were more lucrative in the coal, you got more money. Yeah. You were pestering the training officer for many months before you were 18th birthday, like, keeping reminding him that it was.
It's coming.
It was imminent, it was imminent.
Birthday's coming, I don't want a present, just want a job.
Yeah. So you moved from the, well, for myself, the haulage, and I was a pit pony driver.
Right.
And were associated, working directly with the colliers, because the pony was taken from the stables to the stall, which were Sixers in my case.
What's a six?
Sixers.
Yeah, what's that mean?
Well, the stalls, obviously, in order for, I'll start again, they were a long wall face, which were a face that were more than 1,000 yards long.
Okay, the coal face.
A coal face.
Yeah.
And this coal face was divided or subdivided into districts, right, of which there were 3, and the districts were subdivided into stalls.
Okay.
Anything from aughts to 24s. You know, so Sixers were stall number 6 in the sequence of things, and that would be about, I don't know, 120, 150 yards long.
Okay.
And
so you're basically talking about a 150-yard stretch of the coal face.
Yes, which is a stall.
A stall.
Yeah, and that was served by a roadway along which you could transport tubs.
Right.
As was the next stall and the next stall and the next stall. So they were like veins coming out from what were a cross gate, from what was called a cross gate.
Right.
So the gate that I used down to Sixers was Sixers Gate, obviously. And as a consequence, the coal was filled out by the miners, colliers, and taken into the gate onto a pass-by, and the pony was used to take the full tubs up the pass-by until there was around 20 tubs coupled together that needed taking out and being replaced by empty tubs. Yeah. That was my job. So
so you were waiting with the pony?
No, the pony were waiting by itself.
Right.
Once you'd take the pony to the end of the pass-by, he was tied up because he'd got a head collar on, got a head dress on for protection of his head, like a helmet, a leather helmet, and an halter, obviously, and a nose bag, because he always had to have his nose bag with him. But he never seemed to get a drink of water other than at the beginning and end of shift, because you had no water on the district, you know, in the Store Gate. And mine were called Lion. And Lion. And he was a very good, patient horse. But he could count.
Right.
And he was supposed to pull no more than 3 tubs at any one time. And he could count the links when they stretched and clanked together.
Really?
And if you wanted a 4th on him, then you had to push the last tub, and while the others got moving, and as a result, he didn't feel or didn't hear the extra clink.
God. So, and that getting an extra tub on him was quite profitable, or improved your efficiency and the fact reflection in pay, or?
Well, if you got to the you've dropped on thing. If you got to cold face with your empties, and you were just one shorter a run, and they were going up with 3, and there were a 4th available, then obviously you'd nip it on.
Yeah.
You know, to make it worthwhile, and to move you on a bit quicker. The empty tubs came along from obviously the pit top down the Montague Plain, which was, I don't know, something like a mile and a half.
Montague Plain?
Yeah.
So
why Montague? Because one of the owners of the colliery was Lord Montague.
Oh, right.
And obviously he got it.
Is this, are we talking before coalboard already? I mean,
no, early coalboard, the nationalisation wasn't until 1947.
Yeah, so you came in just after that.
Yes. So technically, a lot of the format of collieries were still private orientated, if you know what I mean.
The culture.
The ideas and that was still there.
Mm.
And as was the, you know, its history.
Yeah. So are people like the Montagues still around?
I wouldn't know, but it's a possibility. The family's still around, isn't it?
Yeah, I just wondered if they were characters in the community, or
they
were just distant, long distant people that were never part of it.
And, well, they may never have been part of it physically.
No.
But they were just a name on the list of directors and owners, weren't they?
Certainly making money out of it anyway.
Yeah. And empties were taken on an endless rope, this mile and a half, down to a pass-by at the in-by-end of the Montague Plain, where they were picked up by a 60 horsepower Hunslet diesel locomotive for transport in-by to the districts that I've suggested the longwall face were divided into.
Mm.
And of course, sometimes there were breakdowns on the colliery surface and the like, and so there'd be a shortage of empties. And so one of your little tasks was to try and make sure you got empties when there were any available for the colliers you were serving. And as a result of that, you usually got a little bit of spending money at end of week, you know, half a crown or something like that.
So you were an integral part of the supply chain, really.
Oh, well,
a very important part
of
making sure the coal and the guys were getting their coal get away from the face.
Yeah.
And if you were inefficient, they would suffer.
Well, the better you were, the more you were respected, and the more spending money you got.
Right.
And of course, obviously, coal went in the opposite direction. You know, when the diesel loco came to the end of the gate and took the coal away, he brought empties, or when he brought empties, he took coal away with him to the same point, and at the bottom of the Montague Plain, and that were put on the other rails at the other side, because there were twin rails, one in and one out of the endless rope, and the coal went then back towards the pit bottom.
When you say endless rope, do you mean it was a loop?
No, yes. Well, you had a large engine that were above the road. The road actually went underneath it, so the engine was slightly raised above the road, and the rope, which were 1.5 inch diameter, went along the they went in by on the right hand side of rails, and down round a huge return wheel at the end by end, at the end of Montague Plain, and came back up the other side to another return wheel, the other side of the engine, and round a single narrow drum, which was the winding drum. So in essence, it was an endless rope.
Right.
That was driven by an electric motor.
Burning away here.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I was doing that job until 1965, and then of course...
Right, so how long was that? That's 15, 14 years? 13 years?
No, 52.
52
no,
to
52,
65?
No, 55, wasn't it?
55.
When I got to 18 anyway,
Right, okay.
and then I persisted and was sent from, because they had a specialised training phase at any colliery, I was sent to the Park Gate scene, which was another scene that we worked, which were deeper, and they called it the Deep anyway, the Denby Deep.
The Denby Deep.
Yeah.
You're a bit of a poet. This is all very nice, and
Is
I love
it?
all this phrase, the
Yeah.
in-by.
Well, they're not my,
That's the terminology.
Yes, that's correct, yeah. And down there, of course, the things weren't as quite, they were more advanced. You had a conveyor instead of pits of tubs on the face, and you had a coal cutting machine which cut underneath the coal, and the coal was brought down by drilling holes and firing shots. And then the coal was filled onto the conveyor.
Can we just go back to how you did it before? How was it brought
Oh, we
down?
haven't got there yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm not trained yet. I'm not
Oh,
on
sorry.
that phase yet.
This is very good.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
carry on.
yeah, yeah.
I'm rushing you along.
Yeah, yeah. And following that training, which gave you an insight into how to deal with coal and its eccentricities, if you like,
Okay.
and the roof and its support and things like that. I then went back to where I'd been before, and the colliers who I worked for accepted me as a filler
Right.
on that particular stall, Sixes. And at that point, you hand got your coal, and that
Okay.
meant undercutting the coal with a pick until you got far enough in, and a crack appeared in it, and you were able to either use a hammer and wedge and drive the wedge into the 7-pound hammer and a wedge, and drive it into the brake to drop a large lump of coal.
Could you explain what undercutting is again?
Well, as you'll appreciate, the coal was 6 feet high. The seam of coal was 6 feet high,
Right.
and a solid wall of coal. Now, in order to make it free, you had to knock its legs from under it.
Oh, okay.
Right, so you had to get down at floor level
Right.
with your pick
Oh.
and chop and chop and
Cut out
chop
a channel.
until you channeled underneath it,
Oh.
and caused it to settle a little bit, which created a crack, right, up the, further along the face.
So how big is your
And we're talking,
trench, or your groove, or your channel? How deep?
well, it was as deep as was necessary to create that fine crack at the face side. And sometimes you were able to get your pick blade into that crack and prise it up,
Yeah.
but at the other times you needed to put a wedge in to make sure you got it. And the actual take of coal was 6 foot, so you had to cut 6 foot in, and then take the section of coal out, because you didn't work your coal straight on, face on. You worked it at 45 degrees,
Okay.
right? So you had to cut a slot into the face of the coal and create a face of coal that were 45 degrees to the actual face, if you know what I mean.
So you're cutting in an angle.
Yes, yes. And
So
then
you're
you
working. And does that mean you're chiseling away, chipping away at an angle of coal? So you're not going like you're not going straight on like that.
In order to get to that point, you had to go straight into it.
Yeah. And then you achieve the angle.
And then you achieve the angle.
So you cut in like that. A trench.
Yeah.
What do you want to call it? You cut in
a groove. We'll say.
A groove.
Yeah.
6 foot high.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got a trench. You've got a channel you've carved.
No, we haven't got to that yet. We've cut that. We've cut the channel in
vertically
for 6 foot vertically.
You've gone in 6 foot.
Yes. Yes.
So you can walk in this thing. You obviously can.
No. Depending on what the type of coal was, pieces fell off.
Okay.
Right. So it wasn't a nice slot.
Right. Oh, okay.
But as long as you got to the 6 foot distance.
Yeah, I'm imagining a very nice, beautiful carved piece of coal. No, it's a rubble strewn.
Yeah. Yes.
Chisely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bits all over and whatever else, and then of course you were able to start to undercut it then.
Right.
And take that 6 foot section.
Right.
Back.
Bloody hell.
For the extent of your particular run that day.
So can I just explain to you what I think you've told me? You cut your groove, which is all rubbly strewn, and you've managed to get 6 foot deep into the wall.
Yeah.
And once you've got 6 foot in, that whole section is the bit you're going to be taking out.
Yeah.
But in order to release it, you cut a groove underneath, which you then start chipping away at and grooving and putting holes in and wedges and hammers, till it starts to break off, and it breaks off a foot above the ground.
Oh, well, depending on how deep you've cut, but you try and get towards as near to the floor as you can.
Right.
Near to the floor, because anything that's left, then you still have to chop up.
Yeah.
Because you have a floor and you maintain that floor. But that section of coal that you've prized off has to go right the way down for that 150 yards of the coal face in order for the whole of the face to advance.
God. How many of you guys are doing this?
Well, there's 4 or 5. You know, there'll be 4 and me as a filler, because the others would be colliers.
So you're a filler. So you're a guy shoveling it into the
Well, the collier got the coal.
Yeah.
And I filled it into the tubs.
Right.
Right. Now, that process had to be done right the way, as I say, along the face.
Yeah.
For that 150 yards, but in order to maintain your advance, when you're done, we'll say 50 yards, then one of the men, usually one of the older ones, would, because as you went along after taking out the coal by hand, you had to set supports. So in our case, it was steel, 8-section steel props with rounded ends, so that the H didn't dig into the floor or dig into the roof, and you put a lid over it depending on whether or not it was precisely that, or you needed a little bit extra, and and they were 6 feet wide and 6 feet apart.
Okay, the props were 6 foot.
6 feet, yes, but they're 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
And every third one.
Do you have lintels?
No. Well, it depends what you call a lintel, but every third one you put a strap bar.
Right.
That was a serrated bar, about 1.5 inches thick, 6 inches wide, right, which helped support the distance between the front prop and the back prop, because you had to have 2 props to make a goalpost system.
Oh,
right?
goalpost system, okay.
And they were at right angles to the face, right, and that was the track which you used for your rails. Your rails were put in that track. Right?
God.
And as you'll appreciate, if you have this track, you need to move it forward for your next take of coal.
So who's laying the track?
One of the men, one of the older men, when you got 50 yards or so down the face, one of the older men would be given the task of drawing off and moving things forward into the next phase.
Okay.
So the face, in actual fact, was staggered a bit.
Yes.
Right, so there'd be a part of the face which was one in front of the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you kind
And so the older man would move the rails forward into the newly timbered ground and then draw the props and bars off behind and allow the waste to fall. But in addition to that, he had to build what were called a pack, which was large pieces of stone built together like a dry stone wall, in the shape of a square. And because it was continuous, you only needed 3 sides because they used the side of the one that was previously built. And that were filled with any smalls or whatever until it reached the roof.
Can I just get my one thing wrong? Is this called advance face?
You're advancing your face, yes.
And behind you, you're creating these walls, these like sheet folds almost of wall that you're chucking the rubble into.
Yeah, but they were of a limited size, right? There were 3 yards. They were 3 yards long, right? Every 20 yards. So it was like leaving behind you a row of houses.
Right.
Right. And in between that, the roof were allowed to fall and fill the waste.
In between the houses?
Yes. Right. And in order to accommodate that, obviously, the set props and bars in that area had to be withdrawn to allow it to fall.
This sounds quite dangerous.
Well, it was. And in order to accommodate that, you had an instrument called a Sylvester, which were a long chain with a hook on it and a ratchet at the one end, which allowed you to pull the props out.
Oh, right. So
rather than you going in with a hammer and knocking them out.
Very good.
So you could pull them out remotely.
I'm glad to hear that.
You could pull them out remotely. And of course, props and bars were reused and reused and reused. Yeah. And, you know, as were the rails. And the only rails that needed extending were the ones in the gate, you know, where the tubs went up the gate, because that were lengthening as the face progressed. Yeah.
So you got rail going right angles, you got the main gate rail, the main ingress, going down there, and then you've got your rail being advanced at right angles to it.
Yeah.
And as you say, it must stop because the face is staggered.
Yes.
So you're going 50 yards and then you've got a wall basically where the next one.
Yeah, but then there's another stall
on the
other side,
which is taken from
so
that face.
You could go in at one end of the 1,000 meters or 1,000 yards and walk right the way through.
Right.
If you wished.
And so so it sounds to me as though one face is slightly ahead of the other by 6 foot.
So they're staggered.
By 6 foot.
Yeah.
One is feeding that ingress and one is going that way.
No,
they're all zigzagging through.
No, they all follow the same premise. You have the gate going down to the face, and then to the right of that is the working face.
Yeah.
Right? And that is what is called sixes. The next one will be sevens.
Right.
But you'll be working right up to the rails of the next face.
Up to the sevens.
Yeah, up to sevens or eights, whichever, or fives, whichever way you're going, like, you know. And in order to accommodate the turn from the right angle turn from the coal face to the gate, were a number of flat steel sheets.
Okay.
Right, so that the tub, when it came down, could be turned on the sheets.
Oh.
And lined up with the track that it needed, you know, for going out by.
Mm. So it's like a very primitive turntable.
Well,
you
yeah,
just
but
get it on that sheet and just
if you remember Dodgems, old Dodgems used to be on flat sheets, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, well, it was very similar to that.
Right.
And in order to accommodate ease of turning, they sometimes wet the sheets. Right. Sometimes naturally, or sometimes with water out of Dudley.
Okay, naturally, yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I carried on with that until, 56, something like that. And but during this time, you know, because the National Coal Board were a decent company to work for. After and during your work, your time at the training centre, you were sent on day release to the Maxwell Schofield Technical College, which I continued to do through pre-senior S1, S2, S3. And that got me out at pit for a day. You know, it was a day away from pit. But as a result of that, I got my second class undermanager's ticket in 1960, August 1960.
Right, okay.
But by that time, I was sort of 23, 24. And you were unable to become a deputy until you had X amount of time, 2 years, at least 2 years coalface experience.
Right.
And so that's basically what I were
you were aiming for.
And at 1961, I became a shop firer at KB Colliery, and then.
I mean, that shot fire, you mean you were in charge of the explosives?
Yes, because I had at that time qualified with the undermanager's ticket. I then, in December of that year, after having had enough coalface experience, went and got my deputy's ticket from the same place, Maxwell Schofield Technical College. And since Denby Main Colliery was coming towards its end, there were no vacancies for any officials, and the only vacancies that were available were with the sister pit, Cadeby Main Colliery.
Okay.
And that's when I began as a shop fitter. I applied for a job at Cadeby, got a job, and internally, obviously, and then started at Cadeby as a shop fitter. But the man I went to see was the undermanager for the Barnsley Seam.
Yeah.
But I can't remember how, but somebody managed to, when I'd actually turned up at Cadeby, they managed to get me to go down. There must have been shorter shop firers at the time. Got me to go down the Hague Moor Seam, where it was a case of firing with explosives and detonators. And I was
what was the alternative? Sorry, what was the alternative to that?
Well, there weren't any.
Right.
At that point, or in that particular seam. And so the coal seam were undercut by the coal cutter and holes drilled, and you fired as and when explosives with detonators. But as I was coming out by one day, an overman that worked in Barnsley Seam, who knew that I'd signed on for Barnsley Seam, spotted me, and he says, "Didn't we sign thee up for Barnsley Seam with Mr. Hall?" I said, "Aye, but I was sent up here." He says, "They're starting down Barnsley Seam on Monday." So as a result, the following Monday I went down Barnsley Seam. Now the Barnsley Seam was much higher than the Hague Moor, which were around 4'6", 5 foot.
You mean the face?
The coal face, yeah. the coal seam.
Yeah.
And in the Barnsley Seam, they were still basically hand-got,
right.
In as much as the coal was undercut, but filled out by hand. And okay. In order to put the coal on the floor, they were using what were called Cardox shells, which were cylindrical shells about 4 foot long with carbon dioxide under pressure, and the end of these shells had 2 fins on them. And because it wasn't necessary with this coal to fire the whole face, these were only fired where the coal was hard and couldn't be got by hand. It was a case of drilling the hole, pushing the shell up and firing from a remote distance, and hopefully the fins would hold the shell in the hole, but sometimes they didn't, and so shell used to come shooting back out.
Jeez.
And so obviously you had to be aware of that. But then they progressed from that to another type of shell called hydrox, which was similar in design, but we used an hydrogen mix. Good. And that was about as successful as Cardox had been. And then were introduced the high pressure compressed air system with pressure up to 2000 psi, and they were called air dock shells, and they were a bit more efficient. They were larger in diameter, about 6 foot long, and were quite impressive. You know, when you turn the valve and open the to allow the compressed air into the shell, which it were called, then there were quite a decent explosion. But right. There were no bad effects. There were no fumes or anything like that. It would just it would just escape in air, basically, under pressure. And then obviously, as I progressed up the ladder and became a deputy and then an overman, I was sent down to, or transferred to Aigmoorseam, which were mechanised in as much as they had panzer chains and coal cutters. And a panzer chain obviously is a conveyor upon which is mounted. It's a sectionalised conveyor with a chain running underneath and back along the top, upon which runs a large coal cutting machine.
So it's like a big rotating disc that's
No, at that time it was like an auger at the front. We're talking early days here.
So you're like a drill.
Yes, but only like two sections of a cylinder going forward. There was a gap in between. There were two like that. They were going round like that. They were like.
Okay.
It wasn't a pointy thing. It was we'll say a drum, an open drum with two pieces cut out. So you got a piece like that with teeth on it, if you like.
Like a core drill.
Yeah.
Section.
Yeah.
Two halves of a core drill.
Yeah. And at the bottom, in by the inner end of that particular section, there were some more teeth, which broke up the lump that were coming down the barrel, if you like. And so that were a trepan shearer, right? Yeah. And then they progressed from that to the disc, which you talk about, which were a drum at each end, or one end, depending on what type you got. Because you had single-ended shearers and double-ended shearers. And depending on which system were introduced to that particular phase, that's what you used. But in addition to that, you had the support system were mechanised as well. You had hydraulic-powered supports. And on that particular face at that time, there were Doughty 5150s, which were 5-legged supports, with each of the 3 legs capable of a 30-ton load. Sustained, not being set at 30 tons, because they were only set at 100 psi, 1000 psi, but they could resist that sort of weight sitting on them.
These are the props?
No, these are what supported. These are what supported the roof. Yeah. We are now no longer with props and bars. We're no longer with powered supports. There were an early type of powered support at that time, the Gwatkin Dobson 5150s, and they had a cantilever bar that went over the area where the conveyor was and machine, to support that. And men could crawl between the 4 legs that comprised the back of the support you know, for travelling up and down the face, because as you'll appreciate, with a coal cutting machine, you have to have a source of supply, which were electric. And in order to get that supply to the machine, you had to have a large cable that ran the 200 metres of the face, and backwards and forwards. And that fell into a trough that was in front of the front leg of the powered support, and created a height of which the coal couldn't fall off the conveyor. It created like a backplate for the coal as it passed along the conveyor. Kept it on its way rather than falling off.
Right.
And along that trough at the top was where the cable ran. And along with the cable there were a water hose, because obviously so many cutting teeth or picks created dust, quite an appreciable amount of dust. And that needed to be suppressed. And you know, from there I went to...
so what were you doing there? You were running as an overman? You were running?
Well, as an overman, you were responsible for overseeing it, of the actual, I suppose, production more than safety, because a deputy is the deputised person who is responsible in law, you know, for the regulations being adhered to around his district. And so the overman really was in charge, I suppose, of making sure that things went smoothly as regards output. You know, so I suppose that was my basic remit. And I was then eventually given the job of a colliery overman in charge of the mine on afternoons.
God. The
whole mine.
So your rise was stratospheric.
No, I'll have been in 35 years before I finished. So it's a gradual rise.
Yes.
Yeah. And so then I was responsible for when the manager and on the back shifts, when the manager and under managers had gone away from the colliery, I was the man who was in charge of the colliery. Any serious events or anything like that, it was my job to notify and set emergency systems in operation if and when. After that, I was given the job of being in charge of the powered supports, which were by this time becoming more and more uprated. We'd got to the situation where we'd got what were called through the 6180 period, where we had 6-leg supports instead of 5. We went to 6240s, and then we went to the ones that were cantilevered and looked like an open shell. And so they were becoming more and more sophisticated as time went on. So I was given the job of being in charge of their upkeep and maintenance. And then there became a job available at area headquarters, where a position was available in a department called Strata Control, which organised the repair and buying of powered supports for the various collieries. And so I ended up getting a job with them, which I had fought last, 14 years of my time. I went there in 1972, and of course I finished when Maggie says, you know, we don't need you anymore. 1987.
Really?
Yeah. And I've been resting ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how old were you then? You were
50, 51, 52, something like that.
So you basically retired early?
Well, yeah, without option.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But I would have continued, you know, and I would go back and do it all again. Me, yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Aye.
Incredible. And you say you had a twin brother?
Yes, still got him.
Oh, brilliant. And that's fantastic. So, and how did his career compare to yours?
Well,
he went down the mine.
Yeah, but he was, I suppose, he was physically stronger than I, and he had no thought of looking towards education. He wanted to get in among big hitters, and whereas I was content to poggle along with the steady old men in pit and that, like, you know, he wanted to be among big hitters and get money, and so he followed his path as a collier, right, you know, and the like, which he was until his time. In fact, he finished a year after me when they closed KB.
So were you you left KB Main and he?
Oh, he was transferred, you see, from Denby Main Colliery closed in 1967.
Right, sorry.
And so the personnel were moved over to KB and you know, found work there, obviously. But he was physically stronger than I, and as a result, he had no aspirations of being anything other than a collier, you know, and getting some money, because at that time, colliers used to earn more than deputies and
really?
Like, you know, yeah. But as things have panned out, we as deputies or colliery officials ended up with a better pension system, right, than they did. So but he went into mines rescue.
Oh, okay.
They wouldn't allow me to go in because they wouldn't allow two brothers
really?
in mines rescue. That's right.
What was the reason for that?
Well, if out happened, two were lost, weren't they,
yeah,
from the same family.
Okay. Jeez. And so, just to go right back, your father, a miner?
No, my father had only one leg.
He only had one leg?
Ah, and he used to sweep roads.
Really?
Ah, we were poor.
Right.
We were really poor, us.
Yeah.
Ah, we only had Daily Herald on the table for a tablecloth.
Daily Herald on the table for a tablecloth?
We
Really?
did, yeah, yeah.
So he was a road sweeper with one leg?
Well, he didn't sweep it with a leg.
No.
But he only had one leg, and he lost that as a child. He fell down in playground when he was 9 years old, and the damage got septic. And in those days, obviously, you didn't have the sort of treatment that you had today, and it was removed in local cottage hospital at Denby there, Fullerton Hospital.
Really?
Which were only around because the miners actually had a penny for the men and a halfpenny for the boys at the colliery stock per week to keep it going. Good and God. It was only because he was part of a mining family at that time and was in Denby that he was able to get his leg removed.
Holy.
And he didn't get an artificial one until 1957. So he had a crutch all that time. And he was one of the best cyclists around.
Really?
Yeah, he had a fixed gear bike, and it was fast as anybody on. Yeah.
One-legged?
One-legged, yeah. Yeah. Aye. But we were poor, because he was only working on like a menial job on to local council, because obviously he was limited.
How many of you were there?
How many
brothers, sisters? How many siblings?
Two of each. So 4 of us altogether.
And your mother?
My mother, oh, she was a generous woman, really. Yeah. You know, and she could bake, and we had some lovely bread and all that sort of stuff. And my dad died early. I think he was 57, with lung cancer, with smoking, because he used to like a packet of Woodbines. And she married again, but you know, she was salt to earth, my mum. She came from a mining background from Denby, Maine, and during the time my dad was alive, she worked for local farmers and that, right, picking potatoes or picking peas or whatever were available, you know. And my gran used to be what they call ganger, so she was in touch with local farmers and she could organise women to turn up for, jump on back at tractor, on trailer, back at tractor and go to local farms to do these tasks, you know. And that's what helped keep us going, really. And now we're taking papers, and me and my brother were taking papers for local news agents when we were at 9-year-old.
You were doing a paper round?
Paper round. Morning and night.
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
That was around school, or?
Yeah, well, you had to go around school, yeah. But in those days, obviously, they didn't miss you if you didn't go.
Right.
You know, but we were regular attenders. In fact, only time I had to be off was when my youngest sister was poorly and my mum needed to go out to work.
Right.
So I had to stay at home and look after her a bit. But
were you the oldest or the?
I was the eldest, yeah, but 25 minutes. Because my brother was a twin, obviously.
Yeah. Gosh. So your father came from a mining family?
Yeah.
But he couldn't
go
down?
From a mining background, no, he had no chance, had he, with one leg.
No. So did you know your grandfather?
Yeah. He worked mostly, well, my maternal granddad, because my other granddad was deceased by the time we were around,
right.
My dad's granddad. But my mum's granddad, he used to work on pit top for the colliery company, but he was mostly involved with gas, because at that time the local company supplied the gas to the houses, the colliery company houses. You know, he had the coking ovens and gasometers and all that at the pit, and of course when they had a gas leak they needed somebody to dig the hole and repair the leak, and I can always remember him coming home smelling of gas, you know.
Wow.
You got a pungent smell, didn't you?
Yeah.
In those days with coal gas.
Yeah. And so you're all living, where are you? You're all living in Conisbrough?
We were at that time because...
your whole family, generations back, you mean? Is that what
No. They were in they used to live in Denby, Maine. And the village were called Maine as well. And don't ask me why.
No.
But the village was built by the colliery company for the miners who worked at both collieries. And we were in the early days, apparently we were living in lodgings with Aunt Florrie.
Right.
For a time until my dad, who was working for council, managed to get a council house up Conisbrough, and we went from there. Lived there until I got married. Because it took a long time for somebody to bother to get me.
So how old were you when you got married?
25.
25. That's not too long.
Yeah.
Not by today's standard, isn't it?
No.
And have you got children yourself?
I've got one of each.
And what do they do now?
Well, I got lad a job at Pitt, and he didn't like it. So he's now a forklift truck driver, because he was made redundant, obviously, after the miners' strike.
Yeah.
And he's a forklift truck driver now for on building sites. Working at Hull at the moment, and he's not happy.
No?
Well, it's a long commute, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And it's the same as he says, you've got people going towards Hull and people coming away from Hull, and that's one of the things that our governments have managed to do for us. They got rid of coal works, they got rid of steel works, and so everybody's to commute now. People used to be able to get up and walk to work. Can't anymore.
Yeah.
Can they?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
But they never admit it. It's not that I'm politically...
no.
But just an observation.
So your dad was a cheerful man?
Oh, hi. Yeah, he got a fag and he went out for a drink, hadn't he? And obviously produced 4 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
So what sort of, just explain to me the kind of, how you deal with the poverty. I mean...
Well, we had a garden at back of the house and an allotment. And of course, you grew cabbages and root vegetables and things like that, you know, and we were, if not coerced, we were, it would have suggested that we help out, digging and the like, and so quite a bit were produced, but many a time we've gone down to local shop and said to them, can you put that on slate while Friday sort of thing, like, you know. And we never got out special, you know. Most of the clothes we wore were hand-me-downs. Yeah. And daughter-in-law always laughs when I tell her we never had any underpants until we were 18. Well, that's really the case, huh? Yeah. And I went short trousers until I was 15.
Really?
Aye. Patches on my arse and all sorts. Have you ever been to school in a pair of wellies in summer? Eh? They get rings round the calves with keep flapping. God. We were hardy folk in them days.
Yeah. And were you typical?
No, I think we were. I think others were slightly better than we were, but as we always said, you could leave your doors open because nobody had got out.
Yeah.
You know, so nobody went into pinch or all like that. And neighbours would say, Maggie, can you lend me a cup of sugar? And things like that, like, you know. So they were a little bit, communities were communities in them days, you know. You could go to your next door neighbour and ask if they got a bit of something. You could borrow, well, you got some to replace it with him for them.
Yeah.
I've never spoke for this long.
That's great. You're very good.
For ages.
You're very good.
Because our lass usually tells me to shut up.
Let's go back to the ponies anyway. So, did you only ever have Lion, or did you have another?
Oh no, well, no, basically Lion, but there were others. I mean, there were a stable of about, I don't know, 22. But the most difficult situation I ever came across was when King got killed. Some runaway tubs had gone down an incline on one of other stall gates, and as we were coming in on mail, it'd been the horse keeper had killed it with what they call the humane killer, which was a helmet with a metal spike in it.
Oh God!
And the spike obviously was pulled out, and it was struck by a 7-pound hammer straight into the brain. Anyway, the horse were being transported back out of the mine on an open-sided tub, which was called a tram. You know, it had to be open-ended for longer material that went in, like rails and props and bars and the like, you know, with its legs broken and folded in.
God.
Not covered up or anything, just...
Wow.
Yeah. So it passed us on as we went in by on to...
And this is a horse everyone knew?
Well, yeah, we won at horses. Yeah.
And how did it get hit? How did it...
Well, there were runaway tubs, some runaway tubs, and the problem is the horse is in the dark. You know, he don't have a lamp on him or all like that, and other than sensing danger, he can't... He doesn't know where it's coming from. Yeah. And obviously there were tubs behind him, and then these tubs came down and squashed him in between them, like, and he were killed.
So you forget you're in real darkness here.
Oh, aye. When your lamp went out, the only way you found your way back to a lighted position was going down and feeling the rails and following the rails with your hands until you got to a lighted area, which which were very infrequent, really. In my days as a pony driver, the only source of light, in addition to your own, in the district you were working, were at the engine houses, where they had a compressed air light, like a dynamo, with a bulb in it, and that was it. You know, so, and when we first started at Pitt, we had what were called a bucket lamp, which was £7 in weight, and with a hook on it, and you had to carry it. It was like a lighthouse, if you can conceive it. It was tall with a light at the top, and if you didn't have what were called a shrouder on it, you got into trouble with whoever were behind you, because walking in the dark with that in your eye, blinding. So you had to put a strip of cardboard or metal or whatever around the back of it, so it shaded the back part of it. You were still able to see forward, but it shaded the back part. And we had them for about 5 years before we got cap lamps.
Really? So this is before cap lamps?
Oh yeah, yeah. I tell you, the pit I started at were really basic, yeah. Which weren't such a bad thing, I suppose, because you experienced the basics of coal mining, didn't you?
Yeah, you sound to me as though you're the most, what's the word, authentic story, or not authentic. It goes back, what you're talking about is almost Victorian, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going, you're in touch with another world here.
Yeah, in fact, the colliery I were at, Denby, Main, was the last pit to have pit ponies. Yeah, and they didn't come out of the mine until 1967. I don't know whether we've got a good audience or what, but there's nobody clapping.
That's brilliant. And I'm quite enjoying doing your head.
I am.
Yeah. I'll tell you, it's a very stressful business, this.
Not
as stressful as coal mining, but it's stressful.
No, it's a doddle coal mining. Summertime, they're going back till tomorrow.
Yeah. You haven't talked about the camaraderie.
Well, that I thought that when we are saying, because
did you get it? The higher up the rankings you go.
Well, the more remote you become, I suppose. But you can be liked and disliked as a colliery official, because there were some bar stools around, who thought they were God.
Bar stools.
Well, you don't want me to say the word properly.
I like that. I'm just trying to picture a load of a nice bar down the mine.
Well, you've got a poor imagination then, and some, overstep the power. In fact, we had one overman that sacked his dad.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, aye. But
God, that was weird. How did that play out?
Why?
How did it play out? I mean,
no.
Why was he at home?
Well, he wasn't a young man. He was in his 60s when he sacked him. His dad was in his 60s, so he was knocking on a bit. In his 40s. Len Harvey, or whatever you want to call him. But the camaraderie is. Everybody knows that you were dependent on the man at the side of you all the time. In whatever situation, you needed to know what were going off, and you needed to get a feel for the place you worked. Because they talk about pit sense, and that was something that came over the years. Because anybody going into a colliery green, you had to get a feel for the place. What sounds meant and what creaks meant, and a little bit of dust falling here or a little bit of stone falling there,
Yeah.
So it was quite a quite a journey, really, I suppose.
I mean, learning the geology of a place and learning about...
Well, you didn't seem to go out of your way to learn.
No.
It just came to you. You just felt it, like, you know. You knew when to move when you know, when certain noises were around you. You know, you could sense there were going to be a little fall of dirt or something like that. You know. And there were one or two colliers used to be a little bit smart as well, or they thought they were. You know, for instance, whenever you in my early days filled a tub of coal, when it got to the surface, somebody had to know from where it came. So you had what were called a motti on it, which was attached to a hole in the side of the tub, which indicated what stall it had come from. Or you had a lump of chalk and put a big number on it. And they were, one or two of them were fly enough to say to you as a haulage hand, I'm only here filling this tub, can I just write tip up on it? So they got the average of what the tub weighed when it got out of the pit, you know. So they'd got away with actually filling a full tub, which were 1,300 weight at that time, you know. They held 1,300 weight of coal, a pit tub.
How long would it take to dig that out?
Well, it's not. Well, you filled about 20 in a shift, you know, which were the time you travelled there and back, because by that time we were under plant works at Doncaster. So by the time you travelled in by then you'd lost something like 3/4 of an hour, didn't you?
Yeah.
You know, and then same back, so it'd be about 5 hours actually working, and then you'd half an hour for your snap, you know. I'm supposing he edits the silences out, does he?
You are?
I'm supposing he edits the silences out, does he?
Well, no, often bizarrely,
the
silences are often quite interesting to watch.
Are they? Oh,
because
right.
it's a moment of concentration or, yeah, bringing things together.
Concentration on your part?
On my part, yeah. It's quite interesting sometimes, you know, when you watch them. Yeah, it's quite an interesting moment, that. But we will be editing anyway, so.
But I should hope so.
Yeah. Although actually, I don't think you'll be edited much. It's been very, very, very interesting. So, when you were doing the, let's go for right back, the cutting, what do you call it? What do you call it? The early form of mining was?
Holing.
What?
Holing.
Holing. There's no explosives at all in that. It's all by hand.
No, all by hand, yeah.
All by hand.
Blisters and all.
Yeah.
Blue scars and everything, you know, when you were chipping away at the coal, and you know, I had one incident where I were chipping away at the coal, and this piece of coal, I watched it all the way into my eye.
Really?
Yeah. And I had to go to the hospital to have it removed.
Good God, how big was it?
Well, it was only a splinter, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
But you could see it.
But there's still a scar apparently in my iris.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, aye. You've got one or two blue scars on your hands and knees and that way. Stuff for flying at you. Of course, you were only in shorts by that time, you know.
All right. What are they called? Bannikers? Are they called bannikers?
Not with us.
No?
No, they were just shorts. Shorts and socks. In fact, they didn't provide you with other than a pair of boots, helmet and a belt when you had to provide all the rest of your clothing, which isn't the case these days. They provided you with all the workwear that you needed, but you had to raid the family chest to get all oddments of clothing and the like.
And there wasn't much from your family?
Not from our perspective now. It's surprising what you can catch. There's somebody throwing a coat away in a pit or something like that, and somebody picks it up.
Yeah.
or if you leave it hung up somewhere for a couple of days and forget about it, it's gone by the time you remember.
So were you ever overman to your brother?
No, he wasn't.
Different pit?
Different parts of pit. Because you can't afford to be that way, can you? Because it becomes a bit of a conflict, doesn't it? You know, do you treat him any differently than you would others, like, you know? Do you tell him he can go out at pit early, or give him a wet note or whatever, you know?
What's a wet note?
Well, well, you were able to go out of the pit with a note to say that you've been given permission. If you're, I look like Maggie Thatcher.
Maggie Thatcher?
You know, if you were working in conditions, because conditions at all pits weren't the same. You had some very wet, water pouring out of the roof, or on the floor and the like, and so if you got into a situation where you were wet and really uncomfortable, then you could be given permission to go out a bit earlier.
Right.
So that were a wet note. It were written on dry paper, but it was because you were wet, you know.
So was it a hot pit? It was obviously in shorts.
No, it was a comfortable pit.
Right.
It was dry and warm. It weren't excessively hot. But obviously, when you're working, you get to be a bit wow. You know, when you're physically working. But I did go to other collieries like Gwatkin, where they were pumping out of that pit 1 million gallons of water a week.
Good God.
And it always makes me wonder where that water has gone to.
Yeah.
You know, once the pit's shut.
Oh, I see.
Where's it gone? Has it migrated through other, you know, into other collieries and spread itself about, or, you know?
Maggie Thatcher?
The nose, well, it might have been some sketch I'd seen of her, but the nose appeared to look a little bit like one of her.
How did you fare in the strike?
Well, because by that time I was with the British Association of Colliery Management, I was not on strike, although I was arrested.
Arrested?
Yes. And we were given the task of, I suppose, just being present at collieries to make sure there were no vandalism and the like, you know, or, you know, somebody being on site to call for help if necessary.
Yes.
But I never came across any trouble, and now we're at Dinnington Colliery, and you know, the men who were on strike on the picket line used to come into offices and mash the tea and have 10 minutes with you, especially when you were on nights, because on nights, people like myself were not encumbered by senior management that were managers and production managers and other people. You know, there were just two on you that were a certain middle management, if you like, and so we were able to show a better profile, I suppose, you know. But I never had any trouble with him, and the only reason I got arrested was I had an old van at the time, and I was on nights, and during the day shift, the so-called security men had caught some miners picking coal on the pit tip, and they confiscated the coal. And my lad were on strike at that time, and he was short of coal, so I thought, oh well, I'll chuck him in back at van and take him home. And of course, the van breaks down, didn't it, at Bramley. And of course, we're talking early morning, and police arrive, and what are you doing with all that coal in your back of your van and all this? So I got arrested.
Gosh.
Ended up at Maltby, and were allowed me one phone call, so I had to ring my wife up and tell her where I was. And of course I got into trouble. But they took coal out of the van and sent me home. I never saw coal again, and sent me home, but I had no else about it. Because I told them I was officially on duty at that time, but the men in the patrol car wouldn't believe me, so it had to be confirmed via the pit, you know.
So that was a bit, well, I imagine quite stressful.
Yeah, of course. You know, you're put into interview room and things like that, you know.
And aggressively treated? Or?
Well, I won't say aggressively, but, you know, they look down on you. You know, I don't know. In my view, there were too many police took advantage of a situation whereby there could be violent and there could be abusive to anyone they considered to be a coal miner, irrespective of position, if you want to call it that. Because there were lots of stories about the men from the Met being super hard, but they were the most disgusting people. When you look at what they left behind, there were canteens that were almost destroyed with their presence, you know, and breakages and all sorts, and theft. Well, there were more pit lamps went missing and stuff than you care to think about. Not that they'll admit it, like, but it happened. As did the involvement of the army.
Yes.
Yes.
And there was rumours that they kind of...
Well, there were more than rumours, because one of the lads who were on the picket line at Dinnington, his lad were in the army, and because they had roving pickets at that time, went to various colleges, they went down Nottingham, and his lad were on duty. He were on police lines.
Really?
Yeah.
Bit of a shock.
Yes. No insignia, no numbers or anything. Just the uniform. And that's what I find difficult to understand, why the Labour government didn't look into it deeper. Because there were more to it. You know, you couldn't have Orgreave, you couldn't have that many horses and that many men on site without pre-planning. Yeah. Considerable logistics must have been, I don't know, phenomenal to get them all there for that time. But that's past, I suppose. Not forgiven by a lot of people. They asked me what I'm doing now I've retired. That's
Oh yeah, what are you doing now you're retired?
Well, that's something.
You've been retired 30 odd years.
I know, but I've got 4 allotments.
4 allotments. So you're still digging?
Well, yeah, but I put something like 2,000 gladiolas out every year.
Hell.
And,
2,000 gladiola?
Yeah. Plant a cane for each one, tie it to a wire and put a bulb in. And they go down to old folks centre, which wife helps to run, and told ladies buy them for 10 pence a piece.
Really?
Yeah, for Funds Foot Club.
Fantastic.
Keeps me out of mischief. And I also collect mining memorabilia.
Yeah?
Yeah. I've got something like 60 odd pit lamps.
Good God.
Not allowed to display them though, they're up in loft. And I can't get a man cave.
So are your allotments all next to each other, or you've got to?
Yeah, they're all next to each other. I mean,
God,
I didn't get them all at once. Like they were, I got them as they became empty. Because it's surprising how many allotments now aren't tended. You know, people. It's too hard work for people. But once you've bottomed an allotment, there's not much to keeping them tidy.
So that must be a hell of a sight in the summer.
Well, yeah.
4 allotments. How many thousands?
No. It don't take up 4 allotments. It takes up an allotment and a half. The others, there'll be I don't know, 400 or 500 onions in, and cabbages and rhubarb and stuff. But yeah, it's quite a sight. But they don't all obviously flower together, because it'd be a waste of time if they did.
Yeah.
You know, because you couldn't take 2,000 gladiolas down to the club and expect them to be sold. They'd all be thrown on tip. So they do come over a period of about 5 or 6 weeks. But you have to go up each morning, even if there's nothing to do, to make sure vandals haven't been in.
Oh, God. Does that happen?
Well, it's happened a couple of times. I've lost rotavator and things like that, you know. I was most annoyed when they pinched me kite.
Your kite?
My kite. My coat.
Your coat.
Don't they understand you?
No, I don't understand you.
Yeah, well. That's how I like.
Wonderfully.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
You reckon?
Yeah. Only little bits and bobs. I'm getting better.
Well, yeah.
It's another country, Yorkshire.
Well, it's God's own.
It certainly is.
So they say.
How am I doing for time, do you know? 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
15 minutes.
We're coming round the corner.
Why are you being timed?
Yeah. We've got 2 hours sitting.
Have you many to follow?
2 more to come today? Have an hour break?
I should hope so.
Yeah. You've been great because you've just chatted on. It's quite nice to try and hold on to all your technical talk.
Well,
whilst trying to concentrate on this and sound. I need to sound intelligent.
Well, you've got to do, haven't you?
I'm trying to.
Got to look the part.
I'm trying to hold on there.
Yeah.
So is your brother an identical twin or a?
No, we're not identical. Although as we're getting older, we're tending to assume similar mannerisms and
really, because often it goes the opposite way.
Sounds, yeah.
Do you see him much?
Not particularly. Although we live in the same village, you know, we've never been close really.
15 minutes, Squire.
On countdown.
We're on countdown, yeah.
Do.
So I suppose you've got grandkids and stuff.
We've only one actually. No, we've got two we've got.
Oh.
No,
Ouch. The one you forgot.
No, we've got two grandkids. We've only one great grandkid.
Oh right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I usually take 2 weeks to do a head, so I can't get everything in.
We'll have a photograph to see if you've missed out.
Yeah. Well, I try and keep it real in the sense of I don't want to come back to it. It has to be done in this period. I have to live with my mistakes.
Well, that's right. And as long as it looks somewhat like, it doesn't matter then, I suppose. Because who's going to know, really?
Well, you think these are going to last, hopefully, for a very long time.
Yes, but somebody's not going to say, oh, I used to know him anyway.
No.
In 40 years' time.
Nice thing about your head, it goes at a slight angle.
Does it?
I've always loved that. If I can get a head with a slight angle in it, I'm very happy.
And how does that help?
Just gives it more character.
Oh, really?
Bit of asymmetry.
So I'm asymmetrical.
You're definitely asymmetrical, yes. I'm sorry to report, sir. Mr. Gwatkin, you're asymmetrical.
Right.
Wonderful for me. So Wales, obviously, you obviously have roots in Wales at some point.
Yes, but we've never explored them.
No.
My dad's family were basically around the Doncaster area, Maltby and the like.
I realised yesterday I was doing short noses. So today I'm trying to get
the right length.
The right length of nosing today. Did you notice? Oh, hello. Yeah. Did you notice short noses yesterday? No. No?
Don't overdo it this time.
Overcompensate.
Might be Pinocchio-esque.
A new art movement. I think I've got you looking kindly.
Oh, well, that's sound then.
You might be quite pleased with that.
Yes, indeed. Better than looking surly, I suppose.
I think you're quite a kindly man.
Well, yeah.
I make evaluations after a couple of hours, you see.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyone that grows gladioli.
Yes, in quantities.
I suppose you and Dame Edna.
Yes, yes.
Gladioli.
Thing is, I only started off with 6.
Really? And they're all from the same?
No,
No,
they've been added to. But we've still got the same.
Do you propagate?
No, they propagate themselves. There's small corms appear, you know, on the main corm in large quantities actually, and they have to be removed. Else it tends to, if you allow them to stay in the ground, they tend to get too weak.
Right.
You know, by so many growing from the same food source, I suppose.
Yes, so the soil has to be. I never get to the ears properly. That's a day's work another time. So basically all of mine is looking like a lot of boxers.
Really?
Well, they do now because they've got cauliflower ears.
Oh, right. That's your impression, is it?
Well, that's all I can do really. I haven't got time to do proper
look what else.
You might even get the white spirit treatment. Do you know what that is?
I've no idea.
Smoothing off.
All right.
Take 20 years off you?
Well, I'm happy with that.
You look 40.
That's 40 years off me then.
Yeah. Don't think I will though. I quite like you being 80. I have a lot of power in my hands.
A lot of 82.
82. What's the nearest experience you've had to this?
Can't say I've ever had one.
Is it like having a haircut, or is it like having a doctor's appointment, dentists?
Well, I suppose it's having an operation in theatre, 2 hours.
Have you ever had one?
Only for my left eye.
What happened to? Oh, was that when your coal went in?
No, no, no. I've got glaucoma.
Oh, right.
And 5 years ago they did the operation on the left eye in order to reduce the pressure.
Yeah.
But they won't do it on the right eye, I don't know why.
Don't they not risk it? I mean, my dad had little eye operations and they would never do 2 eyes in the same operation.
Well, in fact I would consider that the left eye is the worst of the two since the operation.
Oh, really?
But you know, it's when they do the test, they say the pressure's all right. So. Seem to have got more hair than I've.
You got a good head of hair.
Do you reckon?
Yeah. Well, I'm envious of any hair.
Yes, I suppose.
So your wife runs what's the club she...
It's Elm Green Lane Community Centre at Conisbrough, like. She seems to have... well, the local authority wanted to close it 5 years ago, and members took it over, so they have to, you know, pay the rent and rates and electric and everything else. See to its upkeep. One of the many cutbacks.
Yeah. Yet more.
Yes. Although it's been proven that places like that help to keep the old folk reasonably well.
Yeah.
And yet the local authorities seem to be closing more and more. Same with libraries. And
11.
Oh, sure, really? Oh. I'm enjoying this one. That's really boring. You're funny. You're funny.
why should they limit your time?
It's my idea.
This is an artist, he won't stop.
Oh,
Just
it'll
keep
just keep
tinkering.
going, yes, yeah.
And the heads would be like this big.
Well, yeah.
Well, it's not finished, but there you go. What can I say? I like it. I like it. I'm liking your head.
Well, that's something,
Enjoyed
something,
the,
isn't it?
Enjoying the angles in there.
Still, I've got a sloping forehead,
Sloping forehead.
or whatever.
You're going to be at an angle as well. You've got a lovely inclination.
Right.
Just get that right, can I? So it's a lovely inclination. Well, I didn't get a chance to do the old white spirit on you, so I'm sorry.
Fine. Whatever's your tipple.
Have you got some?
Yeah, but, you know, I'd rather get the inclination than a smooth skin.
I'll give you a few minutes before I
Thank
start.
you.
Tell him you started late.
Yeah, you didn't switch your cameras on until 10 past. It's amazing you have to suddenly improvise, it's good.
Stimulates the creative juices.
Yeah. I've never seen a creative juice.
Have you not?
Very interesting. I really enjoyed that one.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much indeed.
Should we do specs on that?
No, not yet. We'll get a photograph before. Not too close, because otherwise we'll... All right.
Thank you.
Can you have a close-up to that camera, please?
Yep.
What do you think, John? Can you see yourself?
Pardon?
Can you see yourself?
Okay. Not without my spec. Yeah, that looks fine. Yeah, yeah.
I think you look young.
Well, younger. Yeah.
Usually everyone looks really old, but I suppose you can't get much older than you.
That's, in that,
Cheeky.
I suppose it's
You've got to be cheeky.
his way, isn't it?
He's an overman, he's used to it.
Yeah.
No, starter control engineer ultimately.
Right.
Starter control engineer.
Yes, ultimately.
Great, well I can fiddle, but I'm pleased with that.
Yeah.
Tends to make you bum.
Yes.
No, but doesn't it?
Yeah. So you'll get a plaster of this,
Yeah.
and as I say, there'll be in bronze as well.
Right, thank you.
Another half hour and I'd have
Completed it.
but yeah, it's great often. I don't know what I'm doing, and sometimes
Yes, John.
Yeah. A bit more wrinkly than that, perhaps.
great.
That's it then.
Yeah, you're done. You're now there forever.